Welcome to the Write Like a Badass podcast. My guest this time around is Trae Dorn. Trae describes themselves as a writer, witch, and weirdo, a nerdy, genderqueer Wiccan witch in Wisconsin. I love the alliteration there. A Wiccan witch in Wisconsin. In addition to writing fantasy novels, a webcomic, and a comic, Trae produces and hosts multiple podcasts. We're going to get to all of that. Welcome, Trae.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Well, let us start out with the obvious question. Why do you write?
Because I have a compulsion to tell stories, and if I don't get them out, I'm going to go insane. And so I may as well show them to other people.
I have to admit, I got onto you through your TikTok videos and they're hilarious. And some of your recent ones really, they resonate with me because you're talking about going back and reading things you wrote previously.
Oh my God, yeah, no, yeah,
It's hard, isn't it?
it's very difficult, especially when so I've only been publishing novels for the last few years, but I've been publishing comics since 2009. And so, yeah, I've got stuff out there that I'm like, why? Why did I write that?
No, I'm sure it's good, but I think
Well,
like a lot of writers, you just look and you're like, no, no, I would do it differently this time.
Well, I think there's also the grand problem that as a writer, you always have the idea of what you're trying to write, right? So like you have this goal in your head of this is what I want this to be, this is what I want this to feel like, and if you don't hit that exact mark of what was in your head, it doesn't matter if what you made was good, you missed it. Like really early on in when I was doing Unconventional, a webcomic I did from 2009 to 2019. There's a story that takes place. I think it's November of 2011 is when the story came out, and it was really like it was a comedic comic, right? Like it was a slice of life comedy, but we tuned in. And I did a kind of a serious story featuring one of the characters, and in my head, I had this grand idea of what it was going to be, and I completely missed the mark for what I wanted it to be. I was like, so I'm like, this thing's rough. Except, literally, the review that forbiddenplanet.co.uk gave me was very deep and also rather brilliant for that story. I put that pull quote on the back of the book because I'm like, okay, great. That's because the one thing, like the hardest thing for me to detach from what I was doing was not seeing that I failed to make the thing I was trying to make, but see what the reader would see and like that it succeeded doing something else. And it became a thing that like it's a story called I Hate November. It's just this weird little thing and that sits in that comic. And it is, I have had people come up to me and tell me that it was important. I'm just like, great.
So people loved it, even if it turned out to be something different than
Right.
what you wanted it to be.
Right. But still going back to it, when I read it, no matter what people tell me about it, when I read it, all I see is the mark I didn't hit. And I have to like remove myself from that thinking and being like, is it what I wanted to do? No. And while part of me is always going to see that failure to not hit the thing that I wanted to hit, it is, I can at least appreciate now that, it was something to someone else in a positive way. I don't know.
It's like you had a child and that child grew up into some different character and you got to let it go. I
Yeah.
think. I don't know if that makes sense. Trae, you've written a series of queer contemporary fantasy novels, the Mia Graves saga. Is it Graves or something
Yeah.
fancy like that?
Graves.
Okay.
Yeah. It's Mia Graves.
Mia is a witch trying
Real
to
simple.
hide from her past. Can you tell me about those stories?
Yeah, no. So it's an urban fantasy series set in a college town in northern Indiana. And I mean, in many ways, in many ways, it's kind of standard urban fantasy fare. There's regular world, but there's a hidden underneath, standard stuff. But, I don't know. It's how to describe the series that I just finished the fifth book writing.
Are there going to be more? Is this
Well,
an ongoing
the
series?
it's ongoing. The fifth book is coming out in September. There are four books out right now. Kind of the rundown of just the basic premise of the show of the series is the main character's a witch, takes place in a college town in northern Indiana, and kind of the one liner for the 4 books that are out now. The first book, The Witch and the Rose, is what if your one night stand was your only hope of surviving a haunted house. The second book, Bloody Damn Right, right spelled R-I-T-E, is what happens when both vampires and your ex show up in town. The third book, Shadowcasting, which is my favorite book, is best described as how to talk a 20-something out of using a magical nuke when the only authority you have is that you work retail. And then the fourth book, Buried Memories, which just came out back in December, is what would happen if you went to a small town and people kept disappearing and you were the only one who noticed.
You use a lot of humor in talking about the writing. Is there humor in the books as well?
There's definitely humor in the books. Because they are serious books, but I can't write things without jokes.
I, I'm not surprised.
I'm not. It's yeah. So there is humor in the books, but besides the fact that it's a kind of a standard, it's queer urban fantasy. Main characters, most of them are queer. It is urban fantasy, but also I like to explore the concepts of moral relativism versus absolutism, and there's commentary of things. I don't know. I don't know how to describe that. I don't know.
Who is reading these books? Do you have an idea of your readers?
uh, roughly, it's the readers I've met are largely queer people who, between the ages of 20 and 50. It's but also not queer people, just people who like urban fantasy. It's my sister-in-law is very much into them, which was surprising.
Nice.
But yeah, no, it's if you like urban fantasy, I think you will like my books. I think that's the easiest way to describe it. But yeah.
How does your being genderqueer and a Wicca witch play into what you write? And let me say first, when I was, I'm a little older than you. Back in the day, queer was a pejorative. It was a very bad thing to call someone. Obviously, that is no longer the case. What is genderqueer? And
Well,
Wicca for people
and
who may not be familiar.
and to be fair, queer has always been the academic term. Um, like for queer studies and things that. So I'm 45. I'm not exactly a young whippersnapper. Um, I'm genderqueer. It's also grouped with the non-binary identity, where we don't necessarily identify as either men or women. It's a large umbrella term. There are lots of things underneath that kind of term, like gender fluid, agender, things like that. I prefer to just use the overall blanket term and not have to give my in-depth description of my relationship with gender. But yeah, it's um, and because as a member of the queer community, it's honest to God, just most of the people I know and talk to on a daily basis are queer. So it's the reason why a lot of the characters in my stories end up being queer characters is because that is, my lived experience and the people in my life's experience. So it's just kind of leads into who I am. And it's also though, I would say that my being queer is the same thing that leads in why I usually set things in, I usually set stories in things like college towns and small towns, because while I grew up in Chicago and Milwaukee, once I was 19, I started living in places like Eau Claire, Wisconsin, Lafayette, Indiana, places like that. And I've worked in places like Whitehall, Wisconsin, which has got 1,000 people. It's I've spent most of my adult life in smaller places, and so kind of the queer experience in these smaller cities is kind of the experience that I've lived with. So that's what comes into there. As for the Wiccan witch, it's I'm a Wiccan, I'm a witch. I'm also heavily involved in the modern witchcraft movement. I host a popular witchcraft podcast. And one of the things that I try to do is, obviously my books are my novels are fantasy. So the representation of witchcraft is obviously a very heightened fictional version of the way witchcraft works, but what I try to draw into it, like the main character works in a witchcraft bookstore, which is very much modeled on real stores that really exist. And the types of witchcraft that she does are still like modeled off of like if she's going to use an herb in a spell, I'm actually making sure I'm researching the correct correspondences and doing things, because even though she's doing something fantastical with it, I feel like it has to be anchored in real occultism, real witchcraft to a degree. It's my favorite thing to do is when characters are like working with witchcraft is obviously I will reference real occultists, but I have fictional occultists and that alongside and intermix the references to kind of give an authenticity to the fictional world of magic that the characters are dealing with. Because, you know, it's if I say that the fictional Aesop Igatol was a contemporary of Aleister Crowley, I think the line is he's a contemporary of Aleister Crowley, except his stuff worked. So it's
Yeah.
like that kind of stuff. Like my experience with real witchcraft, like if it helps me build into a more realistic fictional witchcraft. But also like in my comics, because I write Peregrine Lake, which is a Northwoods Gothic. Like it's still the two my novels and my comics are very different in their settings. Where Peregrine Lake is, I talk about like Peregrine Lake exists kind of a few inches to the left of reality, where there is supernatural elements to it, but barely. Versus, you know, the Mia Graves books, which are about 3 miles to the left of reality when it comes to that. Like one of the main characters in Peregrine Lake, Lynn, who is a character who started in Unconventional, actually. Technically, Peregrine Lake takes place in the same reality, just set 10 years after, with 2 of the characters from that in a very different environment. Like one of the characters is a practicing witch, and I make sure that like when we're portraying that character's witchcraft in that comic, that it is just normal, accurate, real world witchcraft. It's not doing anything special. It's just the normal, real stuff that, you know, people do.
It's staying within that particular context for that.
Right. For that work of fiction. Yeah.
Well, so it sounds like quite a bit of research, even though you're obviously very familiar with witchcraft practices and correspondences. But what else is your writing process? What does it include? What is it like? Do you have the whole story in your head when you start out?
Well, I'm a plotter. I'm not a pantser, but I think it's because I developed writing that way because I started with comics, which is a serialized format. And when you're doing a serialized format, you're not done making all of it when it starts coming out, right? You know, when you're doing a weekly or twice weekly comic strip or comic pages, you are doing a story that's going to come out over the course of a year or two, but you do not have page 50 done when you're releasing page 1. So you have to, for pacing purposes, you have to plot ahead of time when you're doing that kind of writing. Like when you're writing a novel, you can pants, absolutely, because you can always go back in the edit, right? Like when you're writing, you know, novels, short stories, anything, like, because no one's going to see it till it's done, you can pants it and then just go back and like, oh yeah, this part dragged on, I can cut that down and change it later. When you're doing a serialized release schedule, no, you can't. Like that thing you did, the readers already have that. That's in their hands. Like you can't change it. So so I developed in my my writing technique in the way that I write is I plot out the whole thing. And so I took that into when I started writing novels. I start out with kind of the process I do is I write down everything I want to happen. I write out all the character descriptions. I write out the plot. And then I start breaking down the plot even more about like what's going to happen when. And then I literally write out chapter numbers and 1 or 2 sentences. This is going to happen in this chapter. This is going to happen in and 90% of the time that outline is what ends up in the book. Now, obviously, like, and this happened when I was writing Shadowcasting, my 3rd novel. I had an outline, and the character who was showing up on the page was not the character who would do the things that happened later. So halfway through writing that book, I had to sit down and rewrite the outline and change the plot because, you know, what was happening didn't line up with what I had planned. So like I think it's important to be like I'm a plotter, but I will change the plan if it's not working. Like if what I've come up with, like if the character doesn't, like if it doesn't feel right, I will change that. But um usually, like, so I've just completed the book 5, which won't be out till is currently in editing, like, but it's already laid out in the format. But like that book, like, but so 4 of the 5 books, so books 1, 2, 4, and 5 stuck to the outline perfectly. Everything made sense. It was perfectly lined up. Book 3 had to completely change it.
Because that character took hold and took it in a different direction.
Yeah, well, yeah, it got to the point where it was like this would feel for the character to make this move, it's out of character. Doesn't make any sense. Like the motivations don't make sense. So I have to figure out what would happen, and it involved literally I changed the ending of the book. Um because yeah, it just didn't work out.
You said book 5 is in the editing process. Who does your editing? Do you hire an outside editor? Is it a good friend who's good with editing?
I'd do it myself.
Oh, okay.
I'm
Okay.
cheap.
No, no, I think a lot of us are cheap. I was
It's
just
here.
wondering.
Everyone who does labor in production, because I am an indie author, and I'm a firm believer that everyone who does labor deserves to get paid. So it's I believe that the editors, the freelance editors who are out there taking work, I fully believe that if you can, but I don't have the money, and I'm not going to ask anyone to lower their rates because what they do is hard. But it also means that my like I go through I do 3 edit passes. So the first thing I do is, so I finish the draft. I first do a structure and continuity edit, where I just go through the book and I will, like, I'm not looking at the like I will fix, like, if there's an obvious language problem, I will fix it, but I'm not focusing on that. I'm mostly just looking to make sure, like, um, I had this because I currently was doing the edit on the 5th book, and I was going through and I was like, oh no, do I have the are there the right number of days in this week? And had to go through and, like, I only had to change 2 lines of dialogue to fix it. But I was like going through and be like, okay, this book happens on this page, this chapter happens on Sunday, this chapter is Monday, these 2 are on Tuesday. Like listing out the timeline, because on the first, because the first draft, my rule in the first draft is I'm following my outline and I'm just going to keep going forward. If I forget a detail, I will write whatever I think is right down and fix it later. And so the continuity and structure edit is, and like on the most recent book, there were no major structural issues that I found. But like with my second book, Bloody Damn Right, on the structure edit, I completely took a chapter and moved it 3 chapters later, and then wrote a new chapter and like added a bunch of different events, because I was just like, no, this is. It was one of those moments where I probably should have changed the outline during the first draft stage, and I was like, that's stupid. This character is not that stupid.
Is this a character who appears in other books? Do you have characters that go through all 5 books?
Yeah. It's a series. The main the series Mia Graves saga is named for the main character Mia Graves. And the books largely follow. She appears in all 5 books, and then there are other characters who largely appear. I think only 2 characters appear in all 5 books, and that's Mia Graves and then Sarah, who is the protagonist of the 4th book and a kind of a co-protagonist of some of the earlier books. And then like Riley Whitaker, who's mentioned on the back blurb for the first book, she's a major character in all except the 4th book. And so it's there. And then there are characters who are introduced along the way who stay through the series. But yeah, no, it's because it's largely, with the exception of the 4th book, which takes place in a different, takes place in Colorado. Most of the books take place in the same town, so it's the same people largely.
Who
So
knew
yeah,
Northern Indiana was this exciting? I'm sorry.
it's not. I lived there for 7 years. It's not.
And I'm not trying to diss Northern Indiana, but
No,
the
I
fantasy occurrences you're talking about are big.
when my spouse was in grad school, I lived in Lafayette, Indiana for 7 years. It is it's intentional. I intentionally picked it because
The
it's such
contrast.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's and you just don't see it.
I ask a couple of questions of guests in order to maybe give some great information or ideas for people listening. What do you do about your covers? Where do they come from?
So I hire a graphic designer. Mibble Group is the company that I hire. They have reasonable rates. Get Covers is their budget option, where effectively they'll just assemble some stock photos and with their lowest level intern. But that's so for my comics. The covers are designed either by myself, like when I was the artist of Unconventional, and then obviously on the current comic Peregrine Lake, where I work with the very talented Ethan Flanagan. Ethan does our covers, does the cover art. For my novels though, because I was trying to stick to the genre, because one of the big things when you're doing your covers, you want your cover to match the genre you're writing in, and because I wanted something that was more akin to a lot of the other books in the urban fantasy genre, I went with something that's very stock photo heavy. And honestly, it was cheaper to hire a graphic designer than to do it myself because graphic designers get bulk rates on stock images.
Hmm.
I have to pay full price if I'm only want to buy like three. So it is more cost effective to hire a graphic designer to do an hour of work than to do it
That's a
yourself.
good point to make. And what platforms do you sell your books on?
I sell my books. So my books are available through ebooks, Kindle, Kobo, and Barnes and Noble, Nook. And then I also sell EPUBs through my Patreon directly. And then for paperbacks, I dual print on demand through both KDP and through Ingram Spark. So if you buy it on Amazon, you get the KDP version. If you buy it through any other bookstore, you get the Ingram Spark edition.
You've got it all covered. I don't know that I've had anyone say they were on that many platforms.
Yeah, it's well, because I've been publishing like my comics since 2009. Like one of the reasons why I decided to like when I started writing the book series, I just decided to go straight to indie. I didn't bother like looking at querying or anything like that because I already had a full pipeline for putting together, books on my own. So it seemed like, I can just press this button here. Like I've already put in all the work to figure out how to do book layouts and do, you know, all of this stuff. I have that skill. I can just use it.
I loved Peregrine Lake. I took a look, although I can see what you meant when you say that it comes out bit by bit. I was like, wait a minute. If I'd started this from the beginning, I'd have to wait a week in
Yeah.
between each. That's a kind of torture. How did you get started on that, and where did those storylines come from? Because you said they're
So
quite different from your others.
yeah, so Peregrine Lake was an idea I had. So Unconventional was wrapping in 2019, thank God, because Unconventional is about people who run a convention. So that would have been a nightmare to try to write a comic that takes place in real time in 2020 about conventions. So thank God that ended in December of 2019. And after that, I was like, I was stopping and I just was like, okay, because Unconventional had run its course. It was finished. Like, you spend 10 years telling jokes about a certain thing, you run out of jokes. You're just going to repeat yourself. So I figured I wanted to end it on a high note on good terms. But I was sitting there going like, but I need to write something. I need to be writing something else. And so originally Peregrine Lake was supposed to come out in April of 2020. That's when it was supposed to start. It was going to be the 10-year time jump. It was going to be roughly, but I was going to draw it myself. And what happened was with the pandemic, I kind of got writer, like both full writer and artist block. I have still yet to be able to get myself to draw again since then. But Peregrine Lake, I kept thinking about doing. Like, I wanted to tell this story. I had this idea because I spent a lot of time in the Wisconsin Northwoods. Peregrine Lake takes place in the fictional city of Peregrine Lake, Wisconsin, north of Highway 8. And people who know the Wisconsin Northwoods, there are landmarks littered throughout this that are very obvious. But the idea for Peregrine Lake actually had been kicking around for a while before that. Originally, it wasn't going to have this set of characters. Originally, the original concept was going to be a podcast where we were going to do the local Peregrine Lake radio show, a la Chris in the Morning and Northern Exposure. And so the original concept was going to be telling kind of like this kind of spookier stories, but presenting it as like a morning small town radio show. and that was the original idea. And I think originally the idea was Tales from Peregrine County. The name shifted over time, and then I was like, no, I could do this as a comic, and then it shifted, and then I came up with the cast for it, and Bev and Greg and Lynn and Megan come from Unconventional, and I was like, we'll set this 10 years later, which is why technically Peregrine Lake takes place in 2030, which allows me to avoid all sorts of uncomfortable topics.
Yes.
But the but then I started trying to write it as a novel, and I wrote like the first couple of chapters. And what was in that? But what was striking me was how hard it was to actually strike the tone of what I wanted to do in prose, because for me, like some of my favorite moments are the silent parts of the comic where nobody's talking, because I feel like it just, that is the vibe of some of the stuff I like, because it's that feeling of being in the woods in the winter at night. And what happened was that I was talking with my friend Ethan, because I've known Ethan Flanagan since the late 2000s when they were a college freshman at UW Eau Claire. They grew up in Chippewa Falls. Currently, they live in the Twin Cities. I've known them, though, for a very long time, and they were a reader of Unconventional, and when they were younger had done fan art of Lynn and Megan, and like I was joking around because they're very talented artists. I met them when I met them when they were freshmen in college, and they were just drawing, and I was like, I fancied myself an artist, and I saw their art as like I was like, oh no, this person's so much better than me. And that's when they were starting their illustration major in college. So it's, I just joked because they do a lot of art professionally, that they were like, they were running out of, like they were going to a slump, like a slow period for their stuff they were doing. And I just joked, well, you could draw Peregrine Lake for me, because I had announced it that it was supposed to come out in 2020, and we're years later, nothing had happened. And Ethan said, I will totally draw Peregrine Lake. And then it turned in, we planned out so we spent a year like coming up with plans, character designs, talking about the design of the house and like all that stuff. And I modeled Lynn and Megan's cabin in The Sims. It is so if you play The Sims 4 and you read Peregrine Lake and you want to put Sims in their house, in Lynn and Megan's house, technically it is available on the gallery if you search for it, because I just so Ethan could have references for different camera angles, like for different like angles for panels. I built the whole thing in 3D in that, just because I was bored
Wow.
playing The Sims. And yeah, and so we started doing it. We did have to shift to black and white because just we weren't going to meet. We wanted to make sure it came out weekly. So on the current process, we now the comic is black and white with important color. But honestly, I think some of the stuff works better that way with the story, although I do love the first 30 pages in the full color are just so, I wish we had time to do that. I wish we had more time in the world to produce them all at that level still, but yeah, no. And I mean, like, Peregrine Lake is a story that has a beginning, middle, and end. Like there is an end to this story that will be happening, and then we're talking about, even though the comic we're going to do after that.
Oh, that's already in the works.
Yeah, it's well, I have ideas. I have look, for if you see me putting something out into the world actively, it means there's about 10 other things that are sitting back there that I am stopping myself from doing, cuz one of the big lessons I had to learn was that I've got 20 things I need to make, but I got to pick one. But that always means, though, it's like I have like 5 ideas for novels that I'm not writing and 3 ideas for comics, and
I think I can definitely understand that. I have a similar problem. I bet a lot of writers do. Speaking of other writers, what advice do you have for other creatives in general?
oh, just do it and do it bad. Do the bad version. Do the bad version. Your first version's going to be bad. Do the bad version. It's more important to have a bad first draft than no first draft. It's like, here's the thing. You might write a book that is terrible, but hey, at least you've written a book, and you can either try to change it into something good or write the next one. It's like the biggest problem in my experience, is just the fear of getting started and just doing it, and that someone's going to think it's not good. It's going to be not good. Your first one is going to be not good. It's, I think, but also, your idea of bad might not be other people's ideas of bad. I very much think the first year of Unconventional is terrible.
Oh,
I
wow.
think it's bad. I think some of the jokes are stupid. And but you know what? Some people like them.
And you stuck it
And
out.
the comic that it became, like by the time you get into like some of the later stories, I think is really good. And it's created character like Peregrine Lake starts out good in my opinion. But Peregrine Lake would not be good if Unconventional hadn't existed for 10 years.
You built
You
a
know
house.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. And especially like, it's if Unconventional had not been really rough for the like Unconventional was good by the end in my opinion. But like it took a while to get there. And if it had been a product like it had been a novel, I would have had a chance to go back and rewrite those beginning parts that were rough. Instead of a serialized story where again you are locked in
It's done.
to
It's in the
it,
past. Yeah.
yeah, if it's out there, it's out there.
But as you said,
Um
people liked it.
but so yeah, it's don't be afraid of producing something terrible because at least you produced something.
We are running out of time, and I want to get to a few more things if I can.
Okay, so
But first, just letting everyone know that everything we've talked about, the links are going to be in the show notes. You can go see Peregrine Lake. You can check out all the novels, all of your podcasts. That is what I want to get to. Do you clone yourself, Trey? How do you get all this done? You've got, what, three different podcasts going on?
yeah, and also we haven't mentioned the fact that I also am one of the people who runs an anime convention. I literally came from our storage unit, and after this recording, I'm going out to set up vendor tables because we're recording this the day before an event a 3-day event that I run. Uh,
Okay, again, my cloning question. How
I,
many
I I just tell people I do it all very poorly. It's I my friends think I'm nuts. Like I was up to last night. I was up until midnight editing a podcast. It's got to come out on Friday, and it's sometimes people like complain that like, oh, your witchcraft podcast only comes out once a month, and I'm like, do you know how hard it is to get that out once a month? Like it's like I
That's the no it's witchcraft, right?
BS free witchcraft,
Yes, free.
BS free witchcraft starts with a B because that'll put it early in alphabetical order. Uh, but yeah, because there's BS3 Witchcraft, and then I GM Stormwood and Associates. I also GM the Meat Grinder, which is a limited series actual play show that comes out for about 9 episodes a year. That we all record in one weekend, and so that's the secret between getting that show out is that everything's recorded in 2 days, and then it's just
Batch
getting it
recording.
edited. Um, then I'm sure I do another show I'm not thinking of. Thankfully, Nerd and Tie podcast we've put on hiatus, or else that would be burning me out. But then I do, yeah, and I write the novels. I do the comics, run a convention, and I'm also making TikToks and doing other
A lot of
stuff.
social media activity. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you need to. It's. Yeah, no. I don't know. It helps that I don't have kids.
It does give you some more time. I wish I had more time with you, but like you, I'm cheap. I've got the free Zoom.
Oh, I don't.
So, yeah, it's going to cut us off in just a minute. So, I want to say thank you so much for coming on and talking. I think you've got a lot more to say, and I think I probably have to have you on again in the future.
Yeah, and maybe next time use my Zoom account, which is paid.
No, woo, big time. That probably would have been a great idea, but all right. Thank you so much, Trey. Best of luck with all of your many activities. I'm
Thank
getting
you so much for
scratchy.
having me.